What's happening, Elevation Nation? We're back with two new elevators today. This is going to be a really special conversation. We have Bennett and Quinn from QB Ventures. Did I get that right? I see nods. Yes.
You nailed it.
These two guys are best friends. They met in Barcelona. Sound familiar, Elevation Nation? Sam and I lived in Barcelona as well. They became very close. They moved into New York together. And they're entrepreneurs and best friends and co-founders. So guys, what's up? Welcome to Elevation Nation. Sam and I are pumped to have you today.
We're pumped to be here. We were talking a little bit on the pre-call just about how aligned our circles are in interest, and we're excited to chat with you guys.
It's going to be fun, boys. I think, the similarities between all of us, and I'll say these two separate duos, is pretty uncanny. So I guess I'll preface our conversation that if you truly are like Parker and myself, you guys at some point will disagree and argue on this podcast, because that pretty much happens every episode with Parker and I. So we'll see how close in relation we all are together. But boys, we're excited to have you. Obviously, Elevation Nation starts, your initiation is coming on the podcast, sharing your story and getting to know Parker and myself a little bit more. But it's so much more than that. We're now a community, a nation of entrepreneurs, of young adults, helping to elevate and build each other up. And it's just such an honor to have you both here, again, with so many similarities in your entrepreneurial values as Parker and myself. So before we get into things, Parker and I, obviously, we researched QB Ventures, we researched Bennett, we researched Quinn, but Elevation Nation doesn't know you guys yet. So I'm going to let you guys can pick. This is maybe where you argue. One of you guys give an elevator pitch to who you both are and what you are building.
Bennett, I feel like I always take these. I kind of want to hear your elevator pitch.
Yeah,
There we go.
So I haven't prepped an elevator pitch in a while. First off, I'll say Quinn and I do not argue that much, and I think that's the I think one of the beauties of the relationship. It's been nice so far. I mean, we've worked together for a year, or closing in on a year formally, and there's been very minimal arguments, definitely disagreements, but
we like to say intellectually sparring matches.
Yeah, there we go.
That's a good way to put it.
But anyway, I'm Bennett Kramer. So I grew up in New York, went to the University of Texas in Austin, and actually moved back to New York after college. And I did 2 years or 3 years of healthcare investment banking at a company called Kane Brothers, and then 2 years of software and healthcare private equity at a firm called Five Arrows. I actually just switched jobs into a virtual position at one of our portfolio companies at the private equity firm. So it's a company called Bridgeway Benefit Technologies. And so that was one of my portfolio companies. So I knew the whole team going into it and kind of knew the industry pretty well. So I was, lucky to kind of transition to something that I knew. And, a big thing for me was wanting to get operational experience as we think about like what QB Ventures is trying to do. And Quinn and I have had a ton of conversations about that. And so Quinn and I, maybe steal our collective elevator pitch, but Quinn and I, started Wolfgang, which was a single unit franchise that we bought in New Jersey. And that's kind of the working relationship between the two of us. It's been a ton of fun. It's been super hard, super challenging, but, very rewarding at the same time. So.
Yeah. I'll give you guys some context about my background. So I actually grew up in Baltimore, Maryland. I actually knew Parker growing up, which is funny to see our circles kind of realign here. I went to Iowa State. After school, I got into real estate. Then kind of joined a startup, and then recently I joined kind of a private equity company that focuses on franchising, investing in franchises. And that was kind of the origination of how we kind of got to where we were today. But taking kind of a step back, so Ben and I, as you mentioned, we were best friends. We met each other when we studied abroad, junior year of college, and then we subsequently lived together in Manhattan for 2 years. And these are fun times. Over COVID, Bennett and I were obviously living together, and we were just always thinking about, the what ifs, right? The corporate world was great. We were kind of getting kind of the real world experience. Bennett was in banking and private equity. He was working till 3 a.m. every night, and I would see him wake up at 7 a.m. the next morning. And my hours were a little less strenuous, but still a grind. But I would look at him, I'd be like, dude, like, how do you do this? Right? Like the motor was just unbelievable. But he knew that this was
Are you shitting on me or complimenting me?
a little bit of both, I think. A little bit of both. But yeah, I mean, living together over COVID, we were just always kind of just thinking about the what ifs. And I think entrepreneurship was always kind of a part of our mentalities. I grew up in a family of entrepreneurs, so I knew ultimately at some point we would kind of want to take that jump. And we were just kind of like every other kind of two best friends, right? Just like riffing on business ideas and thoughts. And through my company, I got like a bunch of interesting looks at franchising, and we can dive into franchising as a concept if you guys would like. But yeah, we ultimately made the plunge into buying a franchise last November, and here we are.
Well, snaps to you. That is amazing, because a lot of people have those conversations and fun ideas over a glass of whiskey or at a restaurant, especially during COVID. What else was there to do? Oh, let's start this business, blah, blah, blah. But you guys actually put your foot forward and your money where your mouth is, and you're making it happen, which is amazing. Before we jump into that, though, I do want to talk about what are some of those businesses that you guys were thinking, because I know this business that you landed on definitely was not the first and the last. Like, Sam and I have riffed back and forth a million businesses. We were going to start, what was it, toilet paper company, Sam, right?
I was about to say, Parker, if you're going to ask these guys, you have to tell them your toilet paper idea.
Yeah.
It's
toilet paper.
fine.
Well, no, I don't.
It's on the record. It's on the record. It's your idea.
I don't know if we can say it, because I still believe it's a good idea.
Go ahead.
Well,
I think you have to. These might be investors. You never know.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, fine. All right, Sam and I, we're really young, college, coming up with some ideas in the business. We whiteboarded all this stuff. Like, what are some ideas we can make some money on, build a business off of? Premium toilet paper in public places. Come on. You go to a public place, toilet paper is absolute shit, pun intended. Like, it is not good. I'd pay 50 cents or $1 for some premium toilet paper. Just saying, no one's done it. I'm surprised. I don't know why no one's done it, but that's an idea right there.
So you're telling me you don't carry wipes on you at all times in your backpack? That's what I've learned.
I believe Parker actually
Definitely
learned
not.
that lesson. He learned that lesson the hard way.
Definitely
And
not.
this is, we were in China together traveling post grad, and in Asia, I don't know if you guys have ever been, toilet paper in public places funded by that place is not a thing. They do bring toilet paper with them everywhere in their pocket. They sell it as like little, it's like very known. Parker didn't know that, had to go to the bathroom.
Are you telling me, Sam, that you travel with your own toilet paper?
No, I don't. I'm telling the story of
Exactly.
when you had to use Starbucks napkins because no one had your idea.
All right.
So,
oh, my God.
There we go. All right. Sorry. Had to divert. Tell us, boys, about some of the businesses that were on the whiteboard when you guys were coming up with ideas.
Yeah, it's Bennett, I don't know if you have any off the top of your head, but I'll give you just like a broader kind of like look into our thought process. So, I mean, this was during COVID, right? It was the hype of the bull market. Everybody was making a piss ton of money on everything, right? And I think as we started to take things more seriously, we saw that bubble like kind of crash a little bit, right? And I mean, a lot of learning lessons there. But, I think one of the things that we were focused on were kind of these boring essential businesses, somewhat similar to toilet paper. But, we wanted to like get out of that hype, right? And I don't remember any of the other ideas like vividly off the top of my head, but dog grooming kind of fits the mold of almost as boring and niche as it gets. But Bennett, I don't know if you have anything that's on your mind.
Yeah, I think I'd say it was more of a scorecard that we were looking at, right? And so it's like, one being just we wanted services, right? We wanted some sort of like mission critical service that somebody is providing, something that's recurring where people are coming back. And then we just wanted something that's also defensible to COVID, defensible to the macro times, and has good like macro tailwinds to it. So when you think about kind of dog grooming in that perspective, it checks all those boxes. In today's world, I'd say, we're also looking at like a pool maintenance business or the porta potty business, like things like that. That just there's a demand for it. It's completely or a little bit more inelastic, and so I'd say there's more of like a framework or a scorecard that we put together and then thought through like what kind of checks some of those boxes from a business fundamental perspective.
Yeah, and I think one thing to add also, the concept of franchising I think was important to us.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll just give you a quick kind of overview. I mean, I think a lot of people think franchising is McDonald's and Burger King, but I mean, there are thousands of franchises out there, and I think for us who have full-time jobs, right? The beauty of franchising is it's a business in a box, right? And you don't need to come up with some novel concept. The branding's there. You get a lot of support from kind of corporate, right, in terms of like operations and a little bit of just like hiring kind of mechanisms. And for us who were also kind of balancing full-time jobs, the startup, the thought of franchising was like a really good kind of like starter business for us to get into, to give us kind of like the experience, and also just the support that we needed while balancing full-time jobs as well.
Yeah, and I think that point's like super important because we're at the time, we're 27 now, but at the time we were 26, right? Like we've never done this before. We've worked in corporate jobs, and so we wanted that hand holding to make sure that we don't like blow up the whole ship as soon as it kind of starts sailing. So we definitely like leaned on corporate, and we can get into it more, but like we leaned on corporate a lot in the first couple of months to help us make sure we had the right infrastructure and had the right kind of just general best practices for the team in place. So that was incredibly important to us, was being a part of a system that we know works and has some history to it.
It's fascinating. I think it's really interesting because I think of, I read Wall Street Journal a lot. I read Twitter a lot. And I think 10 years ago, you had top MBA students coming out and they want the big jobs in private equity and venture capital and investment banking and consulting, and they probably still now want that. But I think I've read recently there's a big trend that a lot of these MBA grads are saying, screw that, let's do what you guys are doing. And I'm following people like Cody Sanchez on Twitter. I don't know if you guys know her or not, but she is an amazing resource to people who are doing, or she's trying to help people understand how to do what you guys do. So a lot of people are trying to do what you guys are doing. And I'm curious, like, what is your mindset as you approach each day so that you can not only focus very well on what you're building, but making sure that you're differentiating from other people too?
So I'll say a few things. One, I think culture is incredibly important. So, Quinn and I within the team ourselves, we really do treat the employees like family, which is, I think to them, a very foreign concept. So I think building the right team and culture has been incredibly, incredibly important to us. It's something that when we went into it, I think we both underappreciated the value of that. And now knowing what it's like to have a good team to actually execute and be able to build off of like what we're trying to build from a best practice standpoint, I think is super important. So, I'll narrow in on an example from this past Saturday, but like, we instituted basically like a few different, quote unquote, like best operational practices for this upcoming busy season, which is the winter when everyone gets their dogs groomed. And, I think we have the trust in our team where if like we're going to put new policies in place to try and drive more growth, they're going to execute on them. And that's something that we've built off of for the last 8 months, and, having conversations with them almost daily to educate them a little bit and kind of learn how we're thinking about things. And I think Quinn and I are very open and transparent with our employees on how we're running things and how we're trying to run things, and what the numbers look like and all of that, so that they understand that what they're doing from a best practice standpoint is actually working. So I think the big differentiating factor, at least from our value as owners or managers, is being able to instill the right culture to the team. Quinn, I don't know if
well, it's funny
completely
because
different answer, but
well, no, I love that answer. It's funny because I'm thinking back to like the first couple of months when we started this business. I mean, we took over from kind of the quintessential, I guess, business owners, right? They were older, they were in their mid 60s, they wanted to retire. I mean, the store was highly underperforming. I would say the customers or the employees were not mistreated, but they just weren't appreciated. And it's just, I keep coming back to this phrase, like, it just pays to be a nice person, right? Like, I don't think the culture that we created, I think is just about like paying attention and caring about the individual people, right? Like, I remember it was like our first weekend, we just bought all the team's coffee, and it sounds like such like a nuanced, like such a pass away thought, but it was the first time that any of like the employees' bosses have bought them coffees, and it's like, I know it sounds so simple, but it's just it really is the little things, especially kind of in these small business worlds where it's like these corporate kind of policies that we get used to are kind of like an afterthought.
Yeah, but don't undersell yourself, because Quinn now has memorized all their coffee orders, and I have to now yell at
Good
him
for you.
to stop getting coffees for them every single week, because we're just burning hundreds of dollars on Starbucks every time.
So
we go.
you're the money guy. Quinn's like let's keep the culture going, keep everyone happy. I love it.
It's funny because Bennett seems really nice and friendly on this call, but our dynamic is I'm good cop, Bennett's bad cop. So I was yelling at him the other day because now anytime one of the employees has like something like bad or like anything to say, I'm their first call, and I'm like, Bennett, like, why am I dealing with all these complaints? Like, what you do?
They don't bother me with the complaints.
They don't bother me anymore. Brutal.
It's a good dynamic when you both have different roles. It's so similar to Parker and myself and how we work. I guess, guys, right? Like, getting a new job, graduating from school is already scary enough, right? You go into the real world. Corporate as a concept is the safe bet. But any first job is absolutely petrifying. I remember like my biggest fear when I first started at EY was like, I need to figure out where the bathrooms are. Where am I going for lunch? How do I even write an email properly? What do I wear? You have all these fears of this new job, but it's told that that's the safe bet, right? You obviously had some fears as well. Yeah, you had a couple years in the corporate world. I don't know you guys that well. I imagine you were not in the dog grooming business before. This wasn't a family business that you guys knew a ton about. What was that like, being young adults, having imposter syndrome? I imagine we're buying a franchise, right? Like, half of our friends can barely do anything themselves, like fold a t-shirt. You guys bought a franchise. How did you beat your own, I guess, second guessing of such a big decision? And are you still struggling with it, or are you feeling like, hell yeah, we made the right call now?
Well, it's funny. Yeah, I mean, it's so true. I remember, so Bennett and I, we had the asset purchase agreement, right? The contract that basically was like, all right, we're buying this business. And the first night, the night after we signed it, I actually did not sleep. I was so freaking nervous. All this fear, doubt, and anxiety, like, was just boiling over me. And I was like, oh my God, like, is this what it's going to be like being a business owner? And I will say, like, I think you learn to manage that over time. I think being a business owner, the level of stress and anxiety is always there, but you just learn to kind of like put it in kind of like a different box. But yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you, it was the most terrifying thing ever. And I still think we deal with like a lot of fears, but I trusted Bennett, right? Like, I knew we had a really good kind of partnership going into it. I think, to your point, like, we're like, we have very complementary skill sets. And there's something, like, if I were to do this on my own, I honestly don't know if I would have been able to do it, but having him as my best friend and business partner, like, you kind of go through those those dark times together, and that certainly helped with it. But we always knew that at some point, if you wanted to be an entrepreneur, you had to take the leap of faith. And I think our math checked out, our thesis checked out, and it made a lot of sense. But that definitely did not eliminate the fear and the doubt by any means.
Yeah. So just to clarify, you can definitely own a business and not not have your shit together in your apartment, because Quinn is a great example of that. Having lived with him, he eats so much because he's like 6'10", and he would basically throw like all the scraps in the sink. And we lived with 3 other guys. We would all get so mad at him because he would just there would be like full meals throughout the day just in the sink because of Quinn. So
Where are you going with this, man? Where are you going?
I'm just saying, you could have your shit together and not actually have your shit together. But I guess 2 things on the realizations that we had. I think when we first started, and I feel like, Quinn, we haven't thought or spoke like this in a while, but no one tells you what the right answer is, and so we had to make some pretty big decisions in the first couple months about how we wanted to allocate. We basically like stuffed the balance sheet with a little extra cash to invest in the business, just given how the prior owner was running it. And so we had to make some decisions around how to spend on marketing and how to spend on some just like leasehold improvements like the lights and reworking the whole front so it's a little more presentable. And those were big decisions. And there's no right answer at the end of the day, but in the corporate world, you have somebody that will tell you kind of what the answer is, whether it's right or wrong. But we kind of got to a point where we're like, we're our own boss, right? No one's going to tell us if it's right, so we just have to make the decision and live with that. And I think in the first couple of months, that was hard for us to kind of like not understand, but it's just you're not used to being at the top and not being able to sense check it with somebody that has a little bit more experience. So I think that was the first thing. I think the second thing that we struggled with initially was, or we still struggle with this, but getting caught up in the ups and downs. I mean, being an entrepreneur, it's not like you have a fixed salary and it's stable. And so, one week we might have 50 bookings and the next week we might have 20. And, we get very high during highs and very low during lows for like a small finite window. And I think part of the biggest challenge for us is trying to keep like even keeled throughout these ups and downs, because the broader big picture will tell you a way clearer story. So I think those 2 things for us was a big adjustment, being an actual like owner operator entrepreneur versus just the stable check you get from the corporate world.
Guys, those are both incredible points I think you made, and I think it really does show as life as an entrepreneur. You're kind of doing it as you go, and yes, we can rely on our education and our schooling and books and Twitter and resources and mentors, but at the end of the day, you still got to make the decision. You still got to put the foot forward with the idea that it will go the way you think it's going to go, but then life happens. And that is kind of how entrepreneurship goes. You throw darts. Hopefully they're really targeted darts. Sometimes they don't miss. Sometimes they don't hit. That's just how it goes. So I'm curious, you guys have been doing this for a year now, around that, where you actually bought the business and have done what you guys have been doing. Walk us through a high day, like a day that's been really, really good that you guys remember, and then walk us through a day that you guys hit like rock.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
It just says
you're still good. You're still recording.
Okay.
Did you get my question though? Did you hear my question?
Highs, lows.
Give us like a day that was like, wow, we are on cloud 9, to your point you made earlier, and give us a day where you guys were like, why the hell are we doing this? This is the worst day ever. Like, I'm quitting.
And Parker's asking this because I do this to him at least once a week, where we have something that we're so hyped about, and I'm like, dude, I love you, bro. This is amazing. And like 2 days later, I'm like, what are we doing, man? And I think it's hard for people who aren't entrepreneurs to get those mood swings. So I know you guys relate to that experience as well.
Yeah. Q, you want to go or you want me to go? But you guys can't hear him, right? Or you can?
Can't hear him. So
Okay.
I think you start.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, because my phone's saying that you guys are all reconnecting. That's why I was asking. But anyway, so I think highs of highs. I think there's two answers for me. One's maybe numbers focused. One's not. I mean, we don't go to the store. We go once every other week, I would say. So a lot of times the highs are me checking the dashboard and seeing that everything we're doing is working, right? Like the numbers tell a story. I'll keep saying that. And when you see that we have 20 bookings and we have a full day of dogs and everyone's kind of hitting their quota for the number of dogs in a day, it's like, okay, we've come a really long way from what this store was 6 months ago. And like just looking at a snapshot of what the schedule looked like in January versus what it looks like today, like some days like that get me really, really excited. But from an actual, let's just, qualitative perspective, I mean, there's a lot of reward in making the employees feel fulfilled and empowered. And Quinn and I are very hands off, I would say, like in our management style. I mean, we're like pretty laid back people. But I think, seeing them succeed and like being able to give them feedback on like we always tell them like we're not experts in grooming. We're not going to tell you if your cut is good or bad, but all we can do is advise you on like the operational best practices of how to be a good groomer, like the customer interactions, like what to do before you get the dog, what to do after you get the dog, how to rebook. And so like I've seen kind of groomers rebook rates like grow, and that's something we track. We'll track certain metrics and we can see how our input to the employees is taken and how they kind of run with that and ultimately are growing. So it's super rewarding to feel like we're giving the employees a sense of power. And I think they appreciate that as well, and they appreciate how much we care. And so a lot like that element of like culture and just the collective like work coming together for a greater goal, I think is an incredibly rewarding feeling. I mean, you see your impact at a small business is a lot bigger than when you're at an EY or whatever corporation, right? No offense, guys. And so it's nice to see that impact kind of flow through, and that to me is the highest of high.
Yeah.
Quinn, I didn't say a lowest of low. If you got one,
I've got a lowest of low. So we took over in November of 23. Going into January of 24, there was basically a doggy COVID. Okay, so there was this virus that was spreading, and it was only susceptible to other dogs. And our basically bookings went from like whatever it was to basically zero. And
in peak season, December's the peak season.
Yeah, so we took over this business. We had no idea what we were doing. Our revenue was basically falling off a cliff. Our employees were like, what the hell is going on? Granted, they knew it wasn't our fault, and there was like this like kind of unprecedented situation going on. But I mean, it was some way to get into this business. But kind of like everything, it's like, you kind of rely on the two of us and the culture that we built, and we scrapped our way through it. But
did you know that the reason why dogs weren't showing up to the grooming, like, was because of a virus?
Yeah, people would call. Some people would call and ask, like, what are we doing in preparation for the virus? And we have like a doggy bowl in the front of our store where like it's a communal water bowl basically. And like we had to put that. People were telling us to get rid of the doggy bowl because like everyone's gonna get doggy COVID from it. And it's funny, like me and Quinn do all this modeling, and then that happens in the first month, and I'm like, yeah, well, the model didn't predict COVID, so.
You didn't learn to build that into your model after we went through it ourselves? Like, it literally was right there for you.
Well, it happened once. It can't happen again, so.
Yeah, right? That's crazy. All right, Quinn, with you back, I want to ask this question to you, and this is a selfish question. As someone who is fascinated by the concept of buying a boring business and is really into, and we're going to talk offline, off the podcast about this, but one of Parker and my dream is I'm our ops guy. I understand how ops works. Parker understands how people works. That's what he does, people advisory. We have a couple other buddies that are great at marketing. We have a legal person. And that's essentially what we've built out in Elevation Nation is we now have amazing friends who are really good at one part of a business. And so I'm letting you guys in on our 10-year plan. Our dream is to essentially assemble the Avengers of boring businesses and try to do this ourselves like you guys. So I'm now selfishly asking, how the hell do we get started? Give us some tips on where we can go with buying our own business. Like, how did you guys even know where to look? Where do you even begin? What's step one for us?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because, Bennett, we haven't really, I guess, said this publicly, but maybe I do go there. What do you think?
Yeah, go ahead. I think it's also important though to talk about just the crux of like the origination story of Wolfgang. But yes, I agree with you.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I'll give you the origination story of Wolfgang. But so I mean, the beautiful thing about franchising, right, is that you're basically entering a community. So when we were, we talked about a bunch of different sectors, and Bennett kind of gave you the scorecard that we were kind of evaluating based on. And as we continue to filter, I mean, one of the things that we always say is you can't have like analysis by paralysis, right? Like at some point, right, you can do all of the homework, but you have to act on it. So we felt like we pretty confident that this was kind of a business that we wanted to go into. And again, franchise companies have franchisees, and you can basically, they provide you with a list of the franchisees, and you can call as many or as few as you like, and you can basically have these due diligence calls with them. We were calling franchisees from, a handful of different states, and we created a kind of a template of questions that we were asking them from financial to operational. And coincidentally, when we called the owners in Jersey, because that's where we were kind of concentrating our focus on, they decided that they told us that they wanted to sell. So it was kind of luck and coincidence that it kind of fell into our lap like that. But yeah, I mean, again, I think it's just it's an interesting process, right? Like, I think you guys need to just create kind of like your own internal scorecard and filter kind of the things that most are important to you, and kind of start to kind of filter it down from there.
Mm-hmm. And once we narrowed in on dog grooming, we ended up evaluating a handful of different dog grooming franchises. So like we looked at Centown, like Dogtopia, and Wolfgang. And there's a few franchisees that we met across the different franchises that were doing similar things to us. So I think that gave us comfort in knowing that people have a similar kind of objective as we do. But we I imagine you guys do this at EY. Like we basically treated these calls as like expert calls where we went into, every call with the same list of 20 to 25 questions about, their business and how they're thinking about it. And we just had that playbook for, 40 calls across all these different franchises. And that's what, ultimately led to the opportunity. But, we had a multiple hours on end of just like talking to different owners within the space. So that gave us comfort in really getting a good idea of how the model works.
I think it makes sense, right? Like with everything you do, I tend to be, unfortunately, analysis paralysis. I think it's just like my type A OCD. I mean, I'll give you even a funny example. I'm moving apartments. I looked at so many apartments just to try to analyze. I have a spreadsheet going, dollar per square foot, amenities baked into it, fees. Like, we got a whole model going.
We don't have enough for you for Elevation Nation, man. Oh my God.
It's just how my brain works, right? And I think at some point you have to kind of take the leap. I think you guys both mentioned this earlier. Having someone to take the leap with just makes you feel a little bit better. I remember when Parker first told me that he wanted us to do a podcast, I remember saying that I didn't want my face or my name associated with it, that I just wanted to do an anonymous podcast because I was like scared to get my face out there. And like Parker being confident, like, dude, just take the plunge. Nothing's going to happen. We're not going to get fired from EY. Like, it's going to be fine. It's all good. Sometimes you just need that person who isn't such like a type A freak to just push you along the way. And so I totally agree with that. Parker, I'm giving you credit in case you can't tell that you nudged me in the right direction.
That. Okay. I appreciate that. I didn't have to nudge you at all for that. That was great.
I'll give you guys like a little like vote of confidence here. I mean, I think one of the things that has been very apparent to us kind of throughout this year is there's a lot of unsophisticated business owners that are kind of sitting on these like gold mines, right? And I know you hear about all of this on Twitter, right? So like I'm telling you firsthand that there is validity.
How about we live it, Quinn? Welcome to the world of consulting. You should see what happens at our clients. It's hilarious.
It's unbelievable. I mean, it's like my stepfather used to say, like, when I was so nervous for my driver's test, and he's like, look at all those bozos out there who already passed their driver's test, right? Like, it's the same concept with owning a business. Like, you know, again, there's unknowns and there's inexperience, but I mean, the previous owners that we acquired from, I mean, it was like pen and paper, like every mistake in the book that you could name that they were following, and somehow they were still on a kind of profitable, growing business. So it's like, if Ben and I always said, we're like, if we can just do the bare minimum and be average, we'll be okay. So
that being said, though, Quinn, like there was a substantial. So I mentioned earlier that we go like once every other week now, but there was a 6-month window where, you know, every Saturday morning, me and Quinn are waking up at 6:30, and we're taking, you know, the subway to Penn. We're meeting on our corner at Union Square. We're taking the subway to Penn Station in the pitch black. Then we're taking the New Jersey Transit to Glen Rock, like every Saturday morning. And then we'd go Sunday, and sometimes we'd go Friday and work from a grooming table in the back. And like, it's just, there was a lot of work that went into like making this unsophisticated business a little more sophisticated and like automated, honestly. And so that like 6-month upfront legwork is definitely not something I think either one of us miss. Like, it's nice to know that, you know, in the summer when we, you know, went a little bit less, that it wasn't going to just sink. And I think it's more of a testament of like the fact that we went for, you know, 6 months straight every single weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And that's something
you went through the ringer. You know what it takes. Like, you guys have gone through a very challenging time that you know, didn't know what was going to be on the other side, and you guys are still very early, right? I imagine that you're not getting out of this thing right now. And you talk about franchising, you want to do it in other places. You want to replicate what you guys are doing here and do it in other places. So you've already been through that experience once, and the goal is to continue to do that again, but maybe with a little bit more experience. You guys have learned a lot of lessons along the way, which would make the next one that you open probably very different than the way you opened up the first one.
Yeah, I think that's...
We call that...
Go ahead, Sam.
I was just going to say, to relate it back to us, Parker and I have called this concept in Elevation Nation our stacking method, right? So when we first started Elevation Nation, again, full-time jobs, what was the first thing that we wanted to do? We're going to start a podcast. Cool. Now, just to give you guys a little secret, we used to spend like hours doing our outline, prepping for interviews, right? Parker and I have done 300 of these. We did some prep work, but I also know that I know how to lead an interview now. Like, I know how to do a podcast, so I don't stress over it. So we stack. Then on top of that, what was the next thing that we wanted to do? Parker revamped all our social media strategy. Now we make reels. Now we use AI to make, right? Like, that's our next stack. We then started a newsletter. I now write our newsletter every month. And so like, maybe that's again how operations brain works, but as soon as something gets like status quo and we feel confident that it can run on its own and we're Gucci, it's like, what's the next thing that we can stack on top of that? And I find it similar to franchising and operationalizing a business. Is it's like, we got to figure out the bare bones, the structure first. Like, then we can memorize people's coffee orders. Like, that's the fun part that we got to get to, but we need to make sure that we're not writing on pen and paper first.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was going to say, I was going to say something similar before, but I think to the point we've naturally had thoughts about a second location, third location. And Quinn and I have talked about this a bunch. Like, we have our own internal playbook down now, where it's like, we have our insurance guy, we have our best practices from an operating standpoint. We know, what days are the busiest. And so like we can prep all of that in advance. And I think, that 6 month legwork of that I was just talking about, I think we can probably condense that to 3 months, hopefully, or even less now for the next one, which for us is, a massive, massive benefit of just having those like intangible learnings from having the first one under our belt, which hopefully it doesn't get harder than the first one.
Just got to manage a little bit more people and a little bit more things in space.
Couple more puppies. That's all it is.
Couple more puppies.
Couple more
yeah.
puppies.
There
It's
you
easy.
go.
Exactly.
All right, boys. Let's move into our rapid fire section where we'll just shoot some questions over to you. And first thing off the dome, we want to hear it. We'll start with the easy one. Quinn, we'll go with you. You are now in the dog industry. I imagine you know a lot more about dogs. What's your go-to dog toy?
Well, it's funny. We one of Bennett's best friends came over to the store last weekend, and his dog was obsessed with this hot dog, like noisy toy, and it was freaking hilarious. Just him walking around with a big hot dog. So I'm gonna go with hot dog.
I like that.
All right, next rapid fire for you, Bennett. Obviously, you guys got into dog grooming. That checked a lot of your boxes. Take that aside. What is a different business that you're like, damn, that sounds cool. That seems sexy. I kind of wish we were going to franchise that.
Well, so maybe not part of a franchise, but I'd say like pool maintenance or some sort of mold inspection is
Okay.
I'd say like some sort
Mold
of
inspection, baby.
yeah,
Love
some
it.
sort of boring, weird business like that. But yeah, I think just a home service is something we've been looking at too.
All right, next one. This is a little bit more challenging. In one sentence, I want you guys to explain to Elevation Nation, why are you doing this?
Who goes
That is
first?
the least rapid fire question you
Who
could have
goes
asked.
first?
that
One
Parker.
sentence.
That is
It's whatever
absurd.
comes off the dome. Whatever comes off the dome. Let's hear it.
Yeah. I would just say complete control and flexibility of our time.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think we want to be serial entrepreneurs and be in control of what our schedule is.
I think for a lot of people, ourselves included, that are attracted to entrepreneurship, but I'm going to broaden it even more to be elevators, right? You guys are obviously elevators. And for us, that means it's people that just want the most out of life. They want to conquer the real world, go outside their comfort zone and continue to challenge themselves to be a little bit better. I think it just so happens that most entrepreneurs are also elevators, but there's like this inherent, we debate it all the time on the podcast. It's like a blessing and a curse, right? It would be a lot easier probably to be super content with your day-to-day corporate job and the trajectory that you're on and just do that. It's a lot easier to do that. But unfortunately or fortunately, you both are blessed with this elevator mindset, this concept of mental fortitude of just wanting to get more out of life. And I think that's led all four of us into this entrepreneurial world. And I'm just excited to see where you guys end up with it. Our last rapid fire here, if you haven't noticed, behind Parker's shoulder is the largest bookshelf in an apartment in Manhattan. We love to read. We think books are awesome to just learn about something different. So we ask every elevator if they have a book recommendation for us and for Elevation Nation. Bennett, we'll start with you. Do you have a book for us that we should read?
Yeah, I feel like if you have a bookshelf, you probably have it. But Green Lights by McConaughey.
Oh, all right, Texas
guy.
boy.
Yeah,
we get it.
Come on, that was coming.
Quinn, what about you?
I'm a big biography junkie. So one of my favorites is Ride of a Lifetime about Bob Iger. Incredible.
Another great one.
Another great one. Sam and I read both of his books, but I actually am reading this book right now, and Sam and I are going to buy you guys this book called Unreasonable Hospitality by Will Guidara. If you know it or know who that is, basically he's the guy who made 11 Madison Park, the best restaurant in the world, and it's all about not only did they make it the best place for food, but their secret sauce is their culture and the feeling that people have when they're in their restaurant. And I think this applies to everything in business, but for you guys in particular. So we're going to send this your way, and we know you sent us your address. So it's a little thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Yeah.
All right. Our last segment, boys. Every single elevator in Elevation Nation who's joined the podcast and every single young adult that we've spoken to across the country, we've helped them develop this concept that we call your mental motto. It's a phrase that embodies who you are at your core and how you live your life. And for us, it's really important to share our mental mottos. We really think it's like the key to being an elevator. And so, Quinn, we'll start with you. What is your mental motto?
You're muted. You're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. I would say my mental motto is keep it simple. I think we live in a world of just overcomplication and a lot of distractions and this, that, and the other. And I think sometimes just keeping it simple is the hard and the hardest choice, but often creates the best outcome. So keep it simple.
Beautiful. Bennett, to you, my friend, your mental motto.
Yeah. Quinn and I talk about this a lot, but direction is more important than speed. It's taken a while to get to where we're at and where we want to go. And you talked about a 10-year plan, but I'm happy to talk about a 20-year plan. Direction's way more important than speed.
Two beautiful mental mottos. Those are
Great.
awesome, guys. I think obviously a lot to learn, hopefully from each other. And I know I speak on behalf of Parker and Elevation Nation that I'm just excited that you guys are now in our network. You're in our world. You're in our nation. We're honored to have you guys in here. I know I said before we started the show that we're going to have hopefully many more conversations so I can selfishly learn from you guys. You probably noticed I tried to sneak in some of my personal questions into the podcast, but I have many more that I'd love to discuss with you both. You're so impressive for what you're doing. I know this is just the beginning. When I do get a dog, I will be a loyal customer. Don't you worry. But yeah, it's just been great to get to know you guys, and I'm excited to see where you elevate.
Yeah, thank you guys. Plenty of dog treats in your future, I promise.
Likewise. It was great chatting with you guys.
All right,
Appreciate it,
Elevation
guys.
Nation. Until next week, peace. Good